In the world of startup, what's your go-to book recommendation?
I'd say read science fiction. A good science fiction book is about a world that doesn't exist yet. It is about a world that is created by the people in the book, created by the author. It's the art of the possible. I don't know if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, but it's something totally different.
No, that is totally different and original, and I am impressed and blown away that you've characterized startup companies as science fiction, which is brilliant. I mean, who would have ever thought? But that's exactly what they are.
Turning it into nonfiction, right? You start with science fiction, you turn it into nonfiction.
So. Exactly. Oh my God, that is a bumper sticker, man. We got it. That is just like everybody should be understanding and repeating that. Well, hello, Murli Thirumale. Welcome to the show. I'm truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, Brad. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's great to be back together again, So today, I got to tell you, I'm joined by a dear friend and one of the most accomplished startup leaders in enterprise tech, Murli Thirumale. So Murli and I work together at Net6, and he's since gone on to co-found and lead 3 successful startups. Not only Net6, but Ocarina and Portworx, which you're going to hear about today, and each had an extraordinary outcome. Now, he's held executive roles at HP, Citrix, Dell, and Pure Storage. But what makes Murli truly special is the way he builds cultures of trust, fun, and high performance, and his ability to work backwards from a win. So this episode is packed with stories from raising capital and building startups to discovering joy in retirement and beyond. So welcome, Murli.
Hey, I'm looking forward to the conversation. Every conversation with you, Brad, is a pleasure.
Well, good. Well, we're going to have a great one today. Folks love coming to this podcast because they hear about seasoned veterans. Now, some are, at the height of their career, and some have gone even beyond that to retirement. Now, I know you did retirement twice, so we're going to hear both of those today, right?
Yeah, yep. Seasoned is also another word for old, but I'm young at heart, so that's one way to kind of keep me going.
Exactly, young at heart, and they're going to be able to tell by the energy you share today in your storytelling. Now, I know a lot of folks that are going to come and watch this have been a part of those startups that we mentioned, and that's great because they loved working for you and they love hearing this story. And by the way, we want to hear and see a lot of those guys in the comments too, right? So put your comments down below, and we will reply to you, of course. But we know it didn't all start in ways that people might imagine. They didn't get to know you from the beginning, so it feels like we should go back to the beginning of time, the beginning of Murli as he was a little flower budding into the amazing person that he is today. Where should we start this?
Well, Brad, look, you can go back and back and back and back and back in my case. So we won't go back to the Cro-Magnon race. We'll just kind of say, look, when I did my engineering at college in India, I was involved in a lot of co-curricular activities, extracurricular things. That was a bunch of cultural things. And right then I kind of said, look, this tech stuff is great, but you know what? I think I enjoy kind of interacting with people. I enjoy kind of social stuff. I enjoy cultural stuff. So I think I want to do something different and instead of going to tech grad school, which is like a master's degree, which many people did, I decided I was going to go get a business degree, and kind of flex some of that other muscle that I had tried out. And so I kind of came to the US to go to school at Northwestern University, a business school called Kellogg, a great place to be, by the way, and ended up there. And it's always interesting because of a cultural shock, right? Coming over from someplace in India. Fall, it was like 100 in the shade over there. I come to Chicago, Evanston is really, really cold. I came really in the fall, right? So it started to get cold and we had sort of recently there was a polar vortex. We had sort of the equivalent of that in at that time in 1982. So I land there and, there's so many first impressions many people, immigrants have when they come to the US. And I had a lot of those types of things too. But one of the things that struck me was the amount of diversity that was already in the US. There was a huge amount of diversity. And my first example of that was, I remember going to my very first class. It was an accounting class, and I was already tentative, right? Because I'm like, hey, first of all, this is all business stuff. I'm in a new country. I'm not sure I get the accent. Would I understand the topics, accounting? So we go to this professor's class. Professor will remain unnamed. And I remember going through the class, and I'll tell you, Brad, I didn't understand a single word that he said. I just didn't get any of it. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. My very first class is a disaster. I couldn't understand a word.
So are you saying that you didn't understand English or he had a crazy accent?
Well, I thought I understood English, but I understood Indian English, and everything's different. Right? Idioms are different. So I'm sitting through this class, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to fail. I'm going to be shipped back. That's it, because I needed to maintain a grade to continue the scholarship that I was getting. So I come out of class and I look around, and all the other folks, white, brown, Asian, they're all looking at each other going, did you understand a word of what he said? So it turns out that the prof was from the deep South, and he, I don't know, Alabama or something, I can't remember exactly. But nobody understood his Southern drawl. And so that was my first experience. But hey, there's a lot of diversity, not just in the student body, but even, within the US kind of a thing. And I'll tell you the other thing that amazed me, right? I was living off campus in Evanston, and I remember going grocery shopping, right? There was a store called Dominic's, kind of carried my groceries back, and I'm walking on sort of the main street next to the grocery store, and some people, they happen to be white, stop and ask me for directions. And look, I'm telling you, Brad, if you went to India, nobody's going to stop you and ask you for directions, right? Because they don't expect you to know. But that was kind of an example of the diversity and the melting pot that the US was, because I go, look, who would think to ask me? I thought, I just landed here, but somebody's asking me for directions. So the expectation is you're part of a melting pot. You're part of a diverse set of people, and, you're just going to fit right in. So that actually accelerated my fitting right in, because I stopped being afraid and I stopped sort of going, hey, this is how everybody is here. So I might as well kind of jump in and get engaged and get involved. And that's how I'm going to be more part of that amazing melting pot that the United States is.
Well, that's great. Back in the day, there was no GPS and no iPhone, right? Now Google Maps, Apple Maps. So that's the way it worked. You had to ask people. And I guess it was, you just figured, whoever was there must know. So that you're right. I think everybody maybe in that point was treating each other as equals. And that could be kind of a nice welcome message.
It absolutely is, right? You just feel like you're welcomed. And number two, you feel like, hey, I thought I was really different, but I'm really not that different from everybody else. Everybody's different here.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's different. But yeah, it's nice that they were treating each other so nicely. What's interesting? At that time when you were there in Evanston, I literally was growing up in Wisconsin, just about a half an hour north of you.
I remember that's how you got your love of hockey, and you're so good at it. Yeah.
That's right. I was playing ice hockey since I was 4.
Illinois was a great place. I think it had such a mixture of people. It had such a mixture of rich and poor. Evanston was a rich suburb. There were parts of south side of Chicago that were not as quite rich. So it was a great way to kind of learn about the U.S. And it has Italians, Polish folks. I mean, it's an amazing place. I really think it's extremely underrated. Gets a bad rap, but it's a great place, actually.
So what were your big moments in college then that helped define you as a person?
This was a very diverse student body, right? So I think I figured out that I was more analytical than other people just because I had an engineering degree, right? I did a 5-year engineering degree and all of that. But then I discovered that there are people, we had nurses, we had somebody who had run a railroad, small railroad. I mean, there was a very, very diverse body at Kellogg. It was just a great school. And you meet people who bring very different skills, and you learn the importance of these other skills that you don't think are important when you're just doing analytical engineering stuff, right? I mean, I had a glimpse of that because of my cultural activities and all of that. But for example, right, I met some wonderful people. One of the guys I met was this guy, Peter Grace, right? Peter was from the UK. He'd gone to college in Bristol, and he and I struck up a really good friendship. And he turned out that him and another friend, Gary Sokol, and we worked in the summer, in between school years, for our internship. We had an internship in San Francisco, and we all shared an apartment up in the city here, in San Francisco. And I remember Peter was a avid rock climber, right? He did rock climbing. He had climbed in the Himalayas. He was an amazing hiker, and so was Gary. They were all, and this was like, me. I'd never really done all of those types of things. And I remember when we were in the city, one of the first few weekends, he said, "Murli, let's go. Gary and I will take you someplace." I didn't know. I was just, new. I said, sure. And we got in his wonderful Volkswagen, and we drove over. And it turns out that we were going to Yosemite. We left like at 8 at night or something like that. And look, by the time we got to Yosemite, we were so late. It was too dark to find our campsite. We slept on a ditch in the side of the road. And we got there at 1, or we slept at like 1:30. Next morning at 4, he wakes me up, Gary and him and I. He says, "Well, we're going on our walk." He says, he'd always say, "Let's go on a walk," with his British accent. And I was like, okay, what do I know? And it turns out that his walk was taking me up Half Dome. So this was my first ever hike. I had never even hiked before. And I'm climbing Half Dome. Now, I'll tell you, I thought I was going to die. I mean, there were times when, Half Dome is not for the faint of heart. It's not for people, who've never hiked before. And I was doing this thing, and it seemed like it was endless. It was constantly uphill. I didn't enjoy even one bit of it, but he just kept me at it, kept talking me up the hill, and I think I ended up at the top of Half Dome as my very first hike in my life. It was kind of quite an experience. So, kind of coming to the U.S., meeting a whole lot of diverse people. It really was a wonderful introduction, to the country, to a whole lot of people who were not just destined to be engineers, right? It was wonderful.
For those that don't know Half Dome, it's kind of a dangerous climb. Like, I don't know how it was back then, but now you clip in, on this wire that goes up so that you, in theory, if you're clipped in properly, you can't fall. And so you clip the next one past the thing, you unclip this one, and you keep going. And you have these just endless stairs that go up at this sheer drop on top of this face of this rock mountain, effectively. Did you guys clip in?
We didn't clip in, but we had those cables, and we kind of, pulled ourselves up on those cables. You're absolutely right. It's kind of a dangerous little scramble, really, is the only word for it, right? I mean, there's very few people who are upright at that point. Everybody's on their knees and hands, kind of scrambling up, and then you pose at the top like you've just kind of, it's been a breeze. But and there was, I remember this was like towards the end of July, and it was hot as heck everywhere else, but there was snow on top. It was just, awesome. What an awesome experience.
Well, that is for a couple of reasons. One of which is you made that climb, which is hopefully you have no fear of heights. And, you made it, and it's a tough one, and it shows your resilience. But the other thing is it got you to California.
That's exactly right, Brad. What happened is, at that point, I kind of said, this California is just amazing, right? Just beautiful, beautiful place. I was interviewing at the end of next year, interviewed in a lot of places. I remember I had offers to go to a bank in New York. It was an investment bank. I could have gone to Idaho to work for Ocarina. I could have gone to Toronto or Cincinnati for Procter and Gamble, because that was one of the Kellogg was a great marketing school, and a lot of marketing folks came and recruited there. But I ended up in the Valley, back in the Valley, Silicon Valley, working for Hewlett Packard, and the reason for that was, and I remember I took my lowest salary offer by far, right? Because the banks were paying a lot more and all of that. The reason I did that was because I said, look, first, it's California. I just really enjoyed my experience in the summer there. And second, I felt like I've done a 5-year engineering degree. I've got to see if I can leverage that in some way. Of course, the technology, as you and I well know, it gets obsolete every 2 years. And certainly what I'd studied was definitely already obsolete. But I, that was what drove me to come and join Hewlett Packard and in California, and really was one of the best decisions that I think I could have made.
Well, because you had a long career and so many different companies out there. And so what did happen then? As you left college, you chose HP.
I know there's many people probably in your audience who work for HP or who worked for HP. HP has been many different companies in its life cycle, and it's actually split into multiple companies as well. At that time, it was one sort of the original HP, and a lot of the folks I worked with had worked with Bill and Dave, as they call them, Hewlett and Packard, and just a wonderful place to be. And it had this thing called the HP Way, which was just a kind of exemplified sort of how they ran the company. I started as a support engineer. So, I'd done an MBA degree, and I kind of started right at the bottom of the rung, worked my way up. I worked as a support engineer. I worked in product marketing, did some market research and all of that. But what I learned really was about how do you balance business and people. In fact, it's more than just balance. How do you achieve business results with the help of people? So the HP Way, somebody I remember had a wonderful description of the HP Way. They called it hard-headed in business and soft-hearted with people, right? And HP really taught me, how to engage with people, how to get the most out of folks, how to keep them, at the top of their performance kind of rungs by having, people are self-motivated, having them find their motivation and so on. So I'll give you a couple of examples, right? I was fortunate to have worked for some awesome people, and there were amazing leaders, right? Tom Brickharter, Jim Duggan, Mark Allen, Tim Kelly, Mike Bandy, Marty Neal. I'm reeling off a bunch of names. These were amazing leaders, amazing business people, but also amazing leaders for us. And in fact, one of the after a few years in one of these individual positions, we got a new general manager, Marty Neal, and Marty was just a stellar human being, actually, right? And he went about kind of creating a transformation. And, he took some very bold moves. First thing he did was he fired his whole exec staff. He comes on board, he's a new GM, he fires his whole exec staff, and he says, we're going to choose our new exec staff in a completely different way. Now, it took a lot of courage to do that because these folks were already awesome people. So he is kind of bucking the trend. These folks are, people he inherited. He fires them all. And he says, we're going to do this bottoms up. And he started this process, which was so dramatic that, in fact, it led to kind of the word leaked out. And there were some people who kind of heard about this in the press and so on. And I remember we had people from UCLA. There was this gal, Dion Zell. She came over. She was doing her PhD. She says, I'm going to do my PhD on this transformation. So I remember Dion, she even wrote a book about this. There were another book that her prof, I think, or her advisor wrote. So here's what the key was. He said, we're going to transform our business, but the way we're going to transform it is by changing how we go about business, and we do it bottoms up. So one of the things he did was he created for the new positions. He reorganized from a functional team to different business teams. And then he picked this business and he said, I'm going to let the people pick their leader. So he created like a GM selection committee, right? So it was composed of people from the business and they all interviewed people, and he created an open system. He said anybody can apply. So hey, I applied for two of these three jobs that were there. I was just I was just an individual contributor, and it turns out that these people took their jobs so seriously. They were from manufacturing, they were from engineering, they were from marketing, from sales, and all of that. They kind of got together. They did reference checks on us. They interviewed us as a panel. They brought us back a couple of times, and they interviewed, and all the people who were the incumbents also interviewed. And at the end, they picked, and I got picked for one of those jobs. And I'll tell you, it was amazing, right? I mean, first of all, when they picked me, even though I didn't know anything about this product line. It was a cesium atomic standards. It was weird science, weird shit, right? And I didn't know anything about this, and I had come from a different business, but I got picked. Now here's the funny thing, Brad. Because they had picked me, even though I knew nothing about the business, I'd never been a GM or a business kind of guy before, and all of that. One thing is, this team was not going to let me fail because they had picked me, right? So I'll tell you an example of the genius of what Marty did was by going through this bottoms up process, they had picked their leader and they were going to do everything they could to make sure this person would be successful. Usually, I'm sure you've been in situations where somebody gets picked above everybody else and over somebody's head, and everybody's like, well, you got to prove yourself to me. There was none of that. I felt so empowered because all these people, wherever I went, they were like, hey, what can we do to help, right? It was awesome. And in fact, I remember we used to have these things called coffee talks, which is like all hands, right? We call them all hands today. They were coffee talks. I remember my very first coffee talk. I said, I'm also going to be a little bit different. So what I did was I stood up there, and uh, this is kind of hard. Actually, to be honest, it's a little hard for men to do and also for leaders to do, right? One of the things I did was I said, look, I mean, you guys have picked me, so I'm honored, and you picked me for some of these reasons, but you didn't figure out these weaknesses that I have. So I was vulnerable in my first coffee talk, and I said, hey, there are a bunch of things that I might do well, or you hope that I do well, but there's a bunch of things I don't do all that well, and I'm going to need your help. So first things, I just said, I need help. And guess what? I'm not going to be able to fix these things fast enough. So I need you to kind of step in and help me in these areas. And then the other thing I did, which I think resonated with the team, was, managers and leaders, no matter how the business did, they always got rated high because, they just sucked up to their boss, whatever it is. I mean, but I said to them, here is my commitment to you, right? What I'm going to say is I cannot be ranked or rated higher than the rate of how the business does. So however the business does, that's going to be my rank. And so I went to Marty and I signed a contract with him. I kind of put a bunch of goals. And at the end, I said, my rank will be the rank of the business. It cannot be higher than the rank of the business. However the business does is my rank.
So that's interesting, Murli, because as I look at your signature here, I see that it's from 1993. So this is about 11 years into your career here, and you're already a GM with this kind of vision. This is early in your career. This is impressive.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? Count on luck over talent. That works every time. So, yeah. So in fact, talking about that, just one last anecdote I think about HP is just such a wonderful place for me. Is just I learned something that has helped me forever after that. I learned to make bets on people, right? What do I mean by that? So for example, we ended up consolidating two or three businesses. It sort of all grew underneath me as the businesses grew, these new businesses and the cash cows. And so what I did was I did sort of a similar thing. I divided up into business groups, and I had three different business leaders, and I bet on some people who were not incumbents in, already in senior manager positions. Just awesome people: Bruce Greenwood, Lisa Peterson, Ray Musculloch, and I had sort of, I had a hunch. I said, I think these folks are gonna be winners, and I bet on them, put them in place, and man, they delivered. Their teams delivered. Their teams loved working for them, and there was a lot of controversy, right? And I'm telling you, Brett, after a lot of years after that, I learned to take risks with people. I would learn to bet on folks. I bet on you, and that paid off in spades, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that these were dumb bets. I'm saying that these were just sort of a hunch, and then once people realize that you're also taking a risk with them, and you're depending on them, man, they really step up, right? I mean, people step up. That's kind of what I learned. And if you pick people who could be early in their career arc, and I think it's been true for me, whether at all these startups, whether it was individual engineers we hired and made them architects or gave them major parts of the product, or hired sales folks and gave them major territories, or put people in charge of major marketing campaigns, making bets on people has always paid off for me. And I mean, it's something that it's they who did it, right? It's their talent, it's their hard work. But I'm saying there's some sort of taking risks, if you want to call it that. Really, what ended up not being big risks for many of them. Is something that I learned at HP, and I think it's kind of held me in good stead. Hey, so what happened is HP split, right? You talked about HP split into a computer company, computer and printer company, and it split into a test and measurement company. And we had this telecom business and wireless business. It didn't fit anywhere, so we ended up kind of not fitting in either one. And I had to kind of spin the business off, and we sold it to a local company called Symmetricom. And that was how I exited HP. And in a way, it was fortuitous, because I may never have left HP. It was just such a great place, and 15 years, right? So I guess part of this is a lesson for many folks is, I was nearly 40 when I left HP and started my kind of startup career, 39 something. And so it's never too late, right? Don't there I see folks around the valley especially who go, hey, am I am I, too old in the tooth, long in the tooth for a startup? And I go, no, man. I mean, I've done three startups after the age of 40. So it's more of you just got to have the passion, the drive, the ability to kind of go raise funds, all the stuff that a startup entails, take risks, and all of that. But it's never too late. So that's kind of one other thing that happened.
Well, and you got to be careful what you ask for, because you might say, I want to go and run a startup company, and you might kind of get buried into it and see what it really is. You might not know. But that's the beauty of the conversation today, because now we're going to go into those three startups that you did. And the very first one, Net6, which wasn't called Net6 when it started, is where you and I got connected in those early days of that company.
Yeah, you're right, Brad. When we started, it was called Web and Wired. And look, it was a terrible time to start a company, right? We started in July of 2000, I think, as a little small founding team. So that was after the dot-com crash. For people who remember that time, it was well into, everything was sinking. Companies were going out of business, and then it was before 9/11. So it was sort of two big valleys in troughs in the world of business, and we picked that time to start a company. So it was kind of in retrospect, it was the dumbest time to start a company, but you never, there's you never kind of know that when you're doing you're built up on hope rather than reality. So. Look, I mean, and as the story goes, as we'll talk about it a little bit. We did two pivots. So at Web Unwired, which we later changed because of one of the pivots to a company called Net6, we renamed it. We pivoted into twice, and we basically did three almost completely different businesses, different products, different buying centers, different go to market, all in the space of that in a few years, right? So it's an amazing thing. So, but for me, being a GM, you're kind of ensconced in a big, huge company. There were a lot of things I learned, and I think you folks probably saw, man, this dude doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to certain areas. I didn't know anything about fundraising. I really didn't know sales. I never had sales report to me. I didn't really know how to manage a board. There's, board governance and all of that. So all of those were things that I was kind of, learning on the fly. The team was helping, and all of that. And I'll tell you one thing. This is where you learn the importance of talent, right? Um, Look, we in all our startups, we've had amazing people, right? Amazing people. My startup co-founders, right? I mean, there was Gu Rao, there was Russ Lentini, John Thies, and then we hired, you, Brad, we hired Gordon Payne, we hired Barry Phillips, we hired a bunch of sales folks, Bob Whitty, whole bunch of this as we pivoted, right? Our first thing was this thing called a content transformation engine and all that. We had this OEM deal with Cisco. I remember you being up on stage with James Richardson. We kind of got into the executive ranks of Cisco, did really great. And we were chugging along. This thing was going along. And then 9/11 hit. Bam! And our customers went out of business, right? So Digital Island, Exodus, all these ISPs, DLEX, they all went out of business. Well, geez, if your customers are out of business, they can't buy your stuff. But the team pivoted, right? Like they didn't miss a beat. We kind of moved from there. We did IP phones and IP telephony, and then that didn't kind of take off, and then we kind of went one more and went into the SSL VPN business, and I mean, actually, you're a perfect example of the kind of talent who just smoothly moved from what I mean, I remember you giving pitches on SSL VPN like you had invented the technology, you were born to it. I mean, you remember those days, right?
Oh yeah, I love that. The SSL VPN demo was phenomenal because we were competing against IPsec, which was awful, disconnects and all this crazy stuff. And so it was like smooth like butter. And
Yeah.
of course, that's about the time that that Mark Templeton from Citrix was actually looking for that technology as opposed to having some other vendor drive that into his install base. He wanted to own it.
Yeah, I want to get to Mark in a sec, but I want to kind of say one thing that we did, right? This actually, if you ask me the honest truth, Net6 was the hardest startup of the three that we did for me personally, right? Because we had to pivot so many times. I was learning. Didn't know how sales comp worked and all of that stuff. I learned a lot from Bob and other sales VPs. We had 3 or 4 of them, but one of the things that what we built, we'll get to the importance of culture, but we had a lot of fun as a way of keeping our sanity. And, I remember I was saying, because we had all these different businesses we were trying to grow, I said, hey, sales is everybody's job. Everybody is in sales. And I remember we had a picture, we had this culture of faking, putting people's heads on other images and kind of poking fun. And fun was such an important part of what we did. I remember we had this company picture, and then somebody went after I had that little talk, and they put Bob Whitty, our sales VP's head on everybody's face as a way of saying, hey, this everybody's in sales. And so we did a lot of things that were very, very fun. So anyway, this thing led to what you're talking about, the acquisition by Citrix. And look, we found out later on that Mark Templeton had taken a big bet on us, in a sense, right? Because I think an acquisition had happened before that had not done that well. And, you know, here's this Florida, Fort Lauderdale based company. Uh, they were all in software. They had a franchise business chugging along, doing great, you know. But Mark really had this vision of wanting to kind of expand into in a broader portfolio. So he bought a hardware company. So we were a hardware company. I remember even, you know, one of our first meetings, when I was talking, they were saying, "What is an RMA?" No, nobody knew what an RMA was, right? Like a return material, like box needs to be fixed by sending it back to the factory. That was kind of a what? What the hell is that, right? Nobody, all these mechanisms were not in place. But one of the best things that happened there was getting to know Mark, right? You've interviewed Mark, just already, just a wonderful, wonderful leader, right? He had amazing product instincts. He really knew how to energize a whole team of people, and he is an example of a leader with what I call has great followership. It's actually a trait, not of every leader. So not every leader has followership. But if you can build followership, people would follow Mark anywhere. He could say, "I know you don't know much about this thing here and it's full of risk, but let's go." And people would just kind of go after it, right? And do it for him personally. They may, whatever their view was of the enterprise they were going to go do, it didn't matter because they were doing it for Mark. And that's actually a trait that I've seen with great leaders. There's many different leadership traits, but that's definitely one.
Oh yeah, there's many examples of that. I think one of them that I would share in the Net6 context, because there's so many more, is that when he did want to acquire us, he didn't have somebody else evaluate our product. He did it himself. So I literally shipped him one of our Access Gateway appliance boxes to his house in Florida, and he installed it, and we were connected online and getting it all working and so forth. But he gets in there and touches these products himself. He wants to be able to talk as a voice of authority of this does this, and we need this in our company, and he doesn't leave that to others. And I'm sure he did that for every other product that he acquired along the way as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had had a data center in his house. Which CEO has that, right? Like of a major company. And in fact, I think because of that risk that he was taking, I remember this due diligence process. We were all shepherded off into different groups and interviewed in isolation from each other to see if we would say the same things and all of that. It was quite a long process. That he had a great corp dev guy, Mike Cristianzano, and a guy called Mark Thorpe, who became a great friend of mine over the years. Right, so it was quite a process. But I'll give you one example of the Mark Templeton's kind of EQ, right? Like amazing EQ. So, we had me and Gu, and I think all of us, the staff of Net6, were invited over to Fort Lauderdale for sort of one last exec meeting, and we had dinner arranged by Mark with his exec team. These are all accomplished executives. And what he had done, which we didn't know, was he had warned all of them because I was Indian and Gu was Indian. He said, "Hey, you know what? These folks may not eat beef." So he instructed the whole Citrix team not to order any beef and offend us at this intro. He didn't have to do that. We were like, just waiting to get acquired, just a small little company. And then turns out that, I had been training for my first marathon. I was starving. I would eat like enormous quantities of meat at that time. I ordered like the largest piece of meat there, a huge porterhouse, and Gu, I think, ordered beef too. And so all the other Citrix execs are like, these guys are eating beef, but Mark had sort of warned off everybody. In fact, for many years, those guys gave me a hard time about that dinner because they said, "Yeah, man, we didn't order beef just and you were kind of putting it away like there's no tomorrow." So Mark just kind of had that empathy for people and kind of did great stuff for us.
Yeah, and what was amazing is it went through the culture of the whole company, right? It was when we came on board and they acquired us, although the due diligence was pretty rough, and it should be at that point in their company. But it panned out, and they bought us, and we came on board. Now, I remember in the very beginning, we went to the Citrix Summit gathering, which was the partners and all the salespeople, just thousands of people in a massive room, and he gave us an hour on stage. So you and I went out there and showed the SSL VPN product and demonstrated it, and they were all just, dying to get their hands on this thing to move it throughout the world. So that was amazing. And that was the time we printed all those front bezels off the appliance and stuck them under the chairs.
For a software company, that was like a amazing moment, right? Like, oh, we're finally in the hardware business, and we put I thought that was a great idea you had. Like, let's show them a bezel. This is hardware, folks. It's something completely different.
That's right. It's something physical. Now, something that came later was that we didn't realize this is the red dots and the Citrix, logo. When you put a bunch of those appliances into a data center and you look at them all flashing red, the IT manager comes by and thinks the whole thing is on fire and that everything's failing. So we had to fix that problem later on.
Red is a great color for a startup, but not necessarily for an enterprise company with a whole bunch of customers already.
Exactly. But now we had the challenge of going global on this thing. So selling into the install base around the world. Now, I traveled around the world to actually launch this everywhere, all over Asia Pac, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. And then went out to Europe everywhere as well. And it stuck. We had such a great time and a connection out there. I ended up living in Switzerland for 2 years and then launching this out there. And you coming inside as the GM of this business had to figure out, how do we launch this thing globally around the world? That was your challenge.
I remember us talking before you took a big risk, kind of moving your family and kids and, uprooting them from their schools and moving to Schaffhausen, I think. But I remember, because I had lived internationally, in Burma and in Jakarta, and I remember talking about feeling a little bit more like a global citizen and the chance for you and your kids to think more like global citizens. And I remember you telling me a year later, after you were coming back for a visit, how your daughter would just took trains and went over from Switzerland to other countries, even and how it was just a life-changing experience for you. So I think a lot of these startups and their stories are life-changing in so many ways for people, and I'm glad you got that chance to do that. But talking about what you just said, right? So we were just a tiny little team, and it was mainly a technology, and we had to kind of grow. And so I remember us kind of having a discussion, and we put out this kind of big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG, that said, we're going to be a top 3 SSL VPN company. Remember, we had pivoted so many times. We were number 9 or 10 in that race. So we were nowhere near the top. Neoteris, all these other companies. And so what we did was the beauty of having a huge goal that seems unattainable is you suddenly go, well, what am I going to do different? And so we kind of had to do something completely different. So we changed the whole positioning of this away from an SSL VPN, a hybrid VPN, all that stuff we had, and we turned it into a Citrix-like application secure app delivery product. We repositioned it. It became part of the Citrix suite, became one with the presentation server. We launched a platinum edition. And, the point of the story here is, big unattainable goals sometimes causes you to think differently, innovate like crazy. And it worked, right? I mean, one of the things I'm proudest about all the startups that all of our teams have built is not just the teams and how successful the teams have been in their careers, but also that these products are transforming customers' lives. There's so many thousands and thousands of customers who to this day are using, our technology, right? And it's now part of, a big offering. We were the first hardware company, and then they went to buy NetScaler, they bought Teros. So we built like a whole new business for hardware business that is a big part of what Citrix is today. And so it's a great example of setting big goals that seem unattainable and forcing you to think different.
Yeah, I think so. And, it became a big part of the suite. It went global around the world. And, a lot of folks built their careers on that. So there were a lot of people that were XenApp, experts, and others that were NetScaler experts on the networking side. And those teams worked together. Certifications, channel partners would all get those labels and accreditations, and those really went global and influenced a lot of people. So it's good to feel that. Now, when I came back from Europe, I ended up sort of building the Executive Briefing Center program at Citrix, and then I got really connected in with Mark T on doing the Synergy keynotes and all that. And while I'm up there coming off stage, I find Murli and Gu went off and started another startup. So now that you've got it all sorted out, you cut your teeth on Net6 and the acquisition process, you were ready to go do it again.
We had the startup bug, so we kind of handed the business over to you guys who did marvelously with it. Folks like Gordon Payne and you and Barry, all these wonderful folks. And then we went off and we started something completely different, right? We did something in storage optimization. And here's an example of the kind of amazing technology folks like Guwer and Vinod, and we had a guy called Eric Brueggemann, right? These were such smart folks. This was about storage and compression, and we didn't know anything about either of these technologies, right? So one of the things that I've been blessed with is working with people who are just so smart. My co-founders in all these companies have been so smart, right? They, first of all, they could do anything. But that's not enough, right, to be a startup founder. They were also very driven. They were driven to succeed. They weren't just building technology. They wanted it to succeed, wanted it in the hands of customers. They wanted customers to see a transformation of their business with it. And then the third thing, which is sort of feels stupid, but is actually a good thing, they were fearless. They didn't know they were not supposed to be able to build this kind of stuff. Like a lot of people would say, no, you can't do that. Like we had this compression. We would take already compressed files and shrink them another 40%. And people would say, no, you can't do that. And they go, well, watch me. And so this combination of being very smart, being driven, and being fearless. And some people would say stupid, like you can't do that. But they didn't know. They were like, hey, I think we can. Let's try it. Right. And they would try it. And in the valley has been a place where people have reinvented generation after generation of technologies, whether it was microwave to RF to the internet, to software, now to AI, right? And this has been because of people like these folks who are so smart. I've been blessed with folks like Gu and Vinod and Eric and all these folks who really built stuff that couldn't be built before. Nobody thought it could be built before. And they didn't even know that they could or could not, but they weren't going to let that stop them, right? So that kind of a thing is what led to us going off and doing Ocarina, which was basically a technology that would allow you to store 5, 8, sometimes 10 times more data in the same place, in the same storage that you bought before. So it allowed people to save incredible amounts of costs, right? And so it was a great experience for us to start that company. We got funded. Folks like Kleiner and a whole bunch of other people bet on us. Highland Capital, Peter Bell, awesome guy, Matt Murphy. These folks kind of decided to bet on this thing, and we were off to the races. It was really a great experience for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when I heard about this, I also had to figure out what the name Ocarina meant. Is that some sort of instrument somewhere?
It was kind of an African flute. A lot of us were into music. I've been into music for a long time. I think, as you know, you've been in many karaoke sessions at my place. There's more than that kind of music. But we wanted something that was related to music. This thing, if you've seen these ocarinas, they're beautifully crafted instruments. They're kind of handcrafted. They're very unique. And I remember we would hand out every new employee at the next all hands. We would bring everybody. They would be awarded a ocarina to welcome them to the company. And we some people even created a little, Ocarina Networks tune. It was just a bit of fun, and it allowed us. And one of the things I learned from my Net6 experience is don't make the name of the company too specific. I mean, some people say it's good because that's like half your value prop is in the name. but you know what? We have pivoted so many times that I said, well, let's have a name that we could do anything. And if we had to pivot, we never ended up pivoting, but it allowed us to sort of have a generic name that was a little bit different, a little bit memorable.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Plus, you guys are making beautiful music together. I take it.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it's nice. It's nice that you've got the confidence now that you did Net6 and you sold it in and you spun that out, and the VCs had that confidence, so they came to you guys and they helped you. Now, what's really fun then is when you come up with this idea and the engineers are cranking things 40% more than they even thought before. You're still trying to find that product market fit. So the product, well, you can build that. The market, well, those are the customers. So how did you attack those first sets of customers and collaborate with them? And how did they help build Ocarina?
I would say a hallmark of all of our startups that we've done is we spend a heck of a lot of time validating the market opportunity. Look, people can build great technology, right? This is the valley. You can find smart people who can build anything. That's I mean, a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this. Technology is not the hard thing. The hard thing is to find a problem that a customer is willing to part with their money and take their risk with you, right? Customers are equal partners in a startup success. They are taking as much of a risk with you as we think we are taking with building a company. So we did these customer validation a lot of times. First thing, even before starting, we did like 30 customer interviews. I remember we hired this guy, Brad O'Neill from Tenaja Group. He kind of conducted blind customer interviews. And when we shared we were anonymous. We shared our story. We validated whether they had this issue, how big of an issue it was. We shared our solution in concept and told them, hey, would you be willing to kind of install this? And we found that a lot of people. So my rule of thumb here is for enterprise products, if you talk to 25 to 30 customers, you will see the trend, right? And you have to be very open, honest, candid. You have to sometimes use third parties so that you're not rationalizing your choice. But once you do that, you will find that I think you will get a clear indication from the market whether you're going to do, is that going to work or not. And in fact, one of the things that characteristics of the startups we did was we never started with one idea. We had multiple ideas and we competed them against each other. At that time, American Idol was a big thing, and I would call it the American Idol of entrepreneurship, right? We would compete our own ideas against each other, and we all had our favorites. We always ended up picking the one that a customer voted for, where the majority of the customers voted for. So we did that. Now, it turns out that that's not the only time. When you validate, you start something, then what happens is you go off and product market fit is a constant thing. So one of the things we learned, this is nothing new, but it's magical, is we co-created, I call it, a product with some lead customer. So for example, in our initial stuff, Disney was one of the folks, Kodako Photo was the other one, there was DreamWorks was the other one. They all said, yeah, we're really interested in learning more about this stuff. And then so what we did was we used them and they were willing to take a big risk with us and we co-developed the product. We would send them an early version. They would say, this isn't working, that needs to improve. So we co-developed this product with them. And then, the trick is, of course, that they were a leader in the industry. So if Disney said it was great, that everybody would go do that, right? But they would follow Disney because they were a leader. And so people like DreamWorks, Disney, co-created this product with us. And I'll tell you, there are huge other benefits of this co-creation. The engineering team is never in doubt as to what to build. They're not building to some PRD that some product manager has put together and all that stuff. They're building it for, Greg or Rahul at the customer. They are like, hey, that's what Rahul wants, that's what Greg wants. I know what I'm building. So the clarity on product development is clear. Focus, focus, focus. The other thing it does, it gets people really motivated, right? There were times when people would sleep over at night in the office because they go, I'm not working for you, Murli. I'm working for Greg. I've promised him, I've made a commitment to him. I'm going to get it to him on Tuesday. So I'm going to bust my buns. So, it really motivates people when they're working for real customers and they can see it, press the flesh, they've talked to them, they've made a commitment. It wasn't management that's made a commitment, right? And so these kind of customer driven schedules, customer driven products, customer driven definitions are amazing in sort of the impact they have on accelerating your schedule, on creating clarity and focus, on motivating everybody to build the right product, right? And you also build complete products. I'll give you an example. A lot of the times, a lot of engineers will say, I'm not going to build these log things and all of that because it's boring shit, right? I'm not going to, capturing logs, it's boring. But the customers need that stuff. It's amazing. It's so you go from a technology to a complete product, productizing it for actual use in the use cases are all happen because of things like, customer driven schedules.
And it's interesting while all that's going on, because there's a lot of dynamics happening inside a company, especially a startup.
Yeah.
You got to keep the lights on, right? So you got some VC money coming in, and you got to spend that, right? But you can't run out. So you got the engineers focused on building things, and they're off and building it and so forth. And so now you got to get a couple of those customers to kind of pay you a little bit, maybe as much as you can, even though it's early. I would imagine in your experience with these three startups, there were moments where the lights started to dim. The payroll was a bit of a challenge. You got a little nervous about a very few things, but then something divine came along and rescued you for that moment, and you kept going.
Fundraising is a whole different ball of wax. It's probably a separate podcast all on of its own. But I will tell you that I think the trick is being completely honest with your board, right? VCs are smart people. They've seen 100 folks like you, right? They're doing pattern matching. And the key thing, one of the key jobs of a CEO is to keep the board aligned with the direction of the company. And once you do that and you're honest and you're candid, then it's highly likely that they trust you, and trust is the beginning of being able to kind of say, okay, we think you're going to do the right thing, right? And you still have to be smart, you still have to succeed with customers and all of that. But I think board governance is a lot about trusting the VCs trusting you, and so on. But also, I'll tell you, we learned a lot of things, right? One of the things that is something that I learned, and is something that is an issue for many startups. At Ocarina, for example, right, talking about trust, as we were growing hugely. We won, Kodak, DreamWorks, Ophoto, Shutterfly. We even had MySpace as a customer. All these guys, all the big petabyte shops, right, were buying our stuff. But what we found was the regular enterprise, the banks and the retail stores and all that, if they were below a certain size, 250 terabytes, it turns out at that time, then they didn't get the value because they weren't saving that much. Because you take 250, you make it 125, you're not saving that much money for you to take the risk of putting yet another appliance in your thing. So one of the key things is in a startup, what you learn is what you think is a product is actually something the customer thinks of as a feature of something else. So except for the large petabyte shops, what we learned in Ocarina is in the enterprise, people love this capability, but they wanted to buy it as a feature of storage, right? So they wanted to buy it as a part of their Dell storage or their HP or their Pure Storage, whatever, NetApp, right? So they wanted the capability, but they didn't want to buy a separate product for it. They didn't want a different procurement cycle. They didn't want one more vendor, another IP address to maintain, another security product to kind of secure all of that shit, right? So very quickly, as we were growing, we hit a ceiling, and we learned that, hey, you know what? This is really a feature, not a product, right? And so in the hierarchy of startups, you have technology. Sometimes every technology is great, except if it does something of value, then it becomes it becomes something of value, but you think it's a product, but it actually is a feature. So you may never be able to kind of grow a company beyond a certain phase if it is only perceived as a feature. So you have this hierarchy of technology, feature, product. And then if you're really lucky, then you become a category leader. And then if you're really, really lucky and the market is huge and you can build an independent financial business, then you can become a company and be IPO material. So there's this kind of hierarchy of startups, and you have to kind of read the tea leaves, read the market, read customers, and then share that with your board. So we shared with our board, and we said we need to pivot to go become an OEM thing. So we moved Ocarina over to an OEM company. We OEM to, to Dell, to Hitachi, via other, and it's IBM. So a lot of other companies ended up incorporating our technology, and that led to the acquisition essentially by Dell eventually. And so there's an example where the board actually said to us, look, we'll support you if you want to continue. But our conclusion was, look, this is not a IPOable company because it's really a feature of something else. And so we made that decision as a team, and the board supported that. And we ended up selling to Dell, and then Dell incorporated it and into other technologies and other products, and it became a feature really for the company as it moved forward.
That's good that you figured that out, and probably figured it out at just the right time also.
Yes.
So you didn't hit the peak and then sort of fall off the peak, right? And so that's good. When you went to the board, then I would imagine, because you had a great set of VCs and board members, that they were able to introduce you to the right folks, maybe even open some doors for you to make that connection. And, those well-established products probably really needed that feature to show differentiation and add value to the customers, which is just what big products are trying to do all the time. So glued it onto there, and that's great.
You started this conversation talking about financing, and I maybe a lot of people from Ocarina who are going to hear this and go, "What the hell?" They didn't know that, but again, 2008 was a terrible year. We went through that. We actually kind of raised around through that tough time. There was a time when I only had 2 weeks of payroll left in the bank. And, one of the things you learn as a CEO is keep your cool, right? You don't want to panic the team, right? We were very candid. We would share financials with the team and, all the time and all of that. But there was a time when I was within 2 weeks of shutting down, right? And so fundraising has its own rhythm and its own kind of logic or lack of logic and fear and irrationality and all of that stuff. It's a whole different skill that particularly it's really only a CEO and CFO's kind of you want to insulate the rest of the company from that kind of stuff.
Well, it's interesting there because you had a good set of VCs and a board, and they've been through this so many different times. They probably knew you were down to 2 weeks as well, and maybe they wanted you to sweat it out a little bit. They're going to come in with a bridge or something until they figure out what the right move is. But regardless, that doesn't always happen. Some companies that's the end. You gave it a good shot. We're done now. And fortunately, that wasn't the case for you. So it turned out well. You got introduced to Dell. They acquired you guys, and you were there for a while. But I think before you went, isn't there some sort of CEO hot list experience that happened along the way?
Yeah. It's a tool. So look, I've developed, right? I mean, this it's kind of what I believe is that everybody after they've been working for a while, whether it's an engineer, architect, sales leader, they have some level of functional tools that they use, right? So that the advantage of having a bunch of tools that you already know are going to work is you pull that out and you have confidence in the way you deploy it. You are sure-footed. You never doubt that it's going to work because it's worked for you in the past. And it gives everybody else confidence because they can see that, hey, this person seems to know what they're doing, right? So I believe in this toolkit concept for every leader, right? And one of the toolkits I have as a CEO is something I call the CEO hot list. So the CEO hot list, I've used this every place. It's I make a list, okay? At Ocarina, for example, I had this list of no more than 4 or 5 things, okay? And these are things that are bugging me. Some things are things that are I'm not happy about. Some things are aspirational. Some things are things that I want to understand better. I feel like, why don't we understand this? So like 4 or 5 things, I would put those on the wall. It was the CEO hot list. I would put it up. I pinned it outside my office. I would show it to didn't matter what you came to me for. I would show you my hot list. I would show it at all hands. I would post it on whatever notice boards. And my goal was saying, in 6 weeks, I want these things off my hot list. I'm on a warpath to get stuff off my. You remember that Clint Eastwood movie, whatever? Get off my lawn, right? Like, I mean, I used to say that if you've got your name associated with something on my hot list, get off my hot list. Just get off my hot list. Like, hey, dude, you own this thing, and it's on my hot list. Get off my hot list. And so people would scramble. Right? It was a great way to focus the company on things that were important to me. And there were planning cycles, and there were like objectives and tactical. It didn't matter. I would say this thing takes precedence over all that shit. If and people go, it's not on. I go, yeah, I missed it. I screwed up, but now it's on my hot list. You got to get this fixed. So this hot list is sort of a tool that I've used. In fact, I used it just recently. It's a great way to galvanize the company, and it's short-term action, right? I want short-term action, and I would just hound the person. I'd say, you're on my hot list. Get off my hot list.
Well, there's no better way to share priorities,
Yeah.
than to have a hot list to get everyone's attention where it's needed immediately. And it might be short-term things. If it's a long-term project, it's probably not on the hot list. But if it's a short-term, you got to fix this thing because it's got a big impact, go.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was effective. Things
Yep.
worked out well. You were acquired by Dell, and then you'd hit your peak. You retired.
Yeah. So look, I mean, every experience of being acquired is different, right? I mean, I think we had a great experience at Citrix. I think we had a very very good experience at Pure Storage. Dell was a little bit different. Dell was, Michael Dell's amazing leader, right? Just awesome. What a guy, both personally as well as a leader. But I think they were acquiring EMC. They were looking. So there was a lot of other things. EMC, VMware. I mean, I mean, Michael transformed Dell at that time, and he did it very effectively. So we were really, I was ready to hand it over to the people who are going to make those decisions and then move on. So look, our kids were off to college. I have twin daughters, the apples of my eye, and they went off to college. So we were like, hey, we're empty nesters. So I retired, and so here's what I did. I went back to my old bosses, all those folks that I mentioned before. The Mike Bandys, the Martys, the Mark Allens, the world, and I said to them, just give me some advice. I'm thinking of retiring. Give me some advice. And here's what they said. Right, it was very very interesting. They said, look, Murli, you're probably getting a bunch of things from work that you may not even be conscious of it, but you're getting these things, right? You're getting a schedule, you're getting intellectual stimulation, you're getting teamwork, you're getting a sense of purpose, you're getting, recognition, you're getting all these things. And what you should do if you plan to retire is find places where you're going to get substitutes for all these things so you don't get a shock when you retire. Otherwise, people go into depression and all of this stuff. So I heard them all out, and I kind of, and then I just quit cold turkey. I didn't do all of this in planning. But in the next 2.5 years, I had an absolutely wonderful time. Took wonderful afternoon naps. I did scratched every hobby itch I had. But I learned a lot about myself, which has been really very, very useful. So for example, I learned that I didn't care about schedules. I also learned, even though I'm a big teamwork guy, believe me, I believe in teams, but teamwork was not, it's okay. I didn't have to work with a team every day. I also learned that recognition was not that important to me. As I was my parents had brought me up in a way that I have high self-esteem or something. What was important to me was a sense of purpose and intellectual stimulation. So, I'll tell you what, as people retire, that itself is like a journey. I'm going to go through it again now. And it's very, very important to know what's important to you and what's not, right? And so you don't go around trying to seek stuff that you don't need if you have a better feel for yourself. So in my 2.5 years, I learned a lot about what was important to me, what was not. I had a great time in that retirement phase. I also learned kind of stupid things like, there are many things you go, oh, you know what? If I had more hours in the day, I would do this. Like I thought I would do my music stuff like crazy. I couldn't get enough of it. Well, it turns out after doing it for more than an hour a day, I was done. So there are some things that you think are, the passion of your life, and it's just better as a hobby, right? So there's a bunch of things that I learned about myself in that time frame, and I think it's a good lesson for a lot of people to kind of think through, well, what are you going to be? Because you live multiple lives, right? You live a college life, you live a career, you live a post career life, and it's all important to kind of think through all those things too.
Well, I hope you're getting a sense of purpose and some intellectual stimulation from the podcast today.
This is a good one. Yes, it forced me to think about certain things that I'd never thought about for a while. Yeah.
Did you pick up pickleball like everyone else did at that time?
I have not done pickleball, but I do play badminton, which is quite a lively sport. It's not the picnic variety things that you see. That's just a travesty. This thing is very fast, and it's kind of a short cardio. Like my short cardio game I may not be able to keep up a race for a long time. Can't run a marathon like I did a long time ago, but I can do quick bursts of speed, as well as anybody else.
And there might be less knee and ankle injuries in badminton than pickleball.
Yeah, I think that's true. I see a lot of pickleball injuries.
So from that 2.5 years, something clicked inside you and you said, well, you know what? I think I got one more in me.
I got pulled back in again. These wonderful set of folks, right? Gu, just amazing entrepreneurs in their own right. I started to kind of get in some advisory work here and there, and then I got sucked in. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I got sucked into doing, uh, helping, and then kind of just got pulled in, and we went off, and the Portworx journey has been amazing, right? It's been in some ways the largest, and the most successful, I think, of all the startups that we've done. Every startup is successful in its own way, but there's a lot to be proud of that the Portworx team has pulled off, right? Building a category, and that was amazing. And we did end up jumping past that part. Remember, I talked about sometimes some things is only a feature and it's not its own product. Well, Portworx is its own product, right? It has enough value, it has enough oomph of a value prop, and the way it's deployed, the way it's procured, that people can budget for it on its own, that people will make an investment to learn it independently as its own kind of product. It's a product in the container space, doing data management and storage for this new technology called containers. It's not new anymore, it's 10 years old now, but it's a rapidly growing technology, and it's something that we built, again, using the same technique I talked about before. A lot of customer validation. We talked to probably about 30 customers, and they kind of all echoed that this was an issue that they saw, and we jumped in, and we've really kind of built an amazing franchise. I mean, I'm so proud of what the team has accomplished. I think we have 450 or so active customers. And these are our customers read like a who's who of the Fortune 1000, right? I mean, these are, some of the largest banks, the largest retail companies, the largest manufacturing companies. For example, these are all public kind of examples, so I can quote them. HSBC, is using us on their payment kind of mechanism to do interbank payments, literally moving trillions of dollars on Portworx technology, right? I mean, Ford is using us on the manufacturing floor to build the Lightning truck, right? In two or three different parts of the manufacturing floor. T-Mobile has been using us for now, like it's close to 7-8 years now, thousands and thousands of nodes deployed to do, customer handling, bringing onboarding of customers and all of that. So these are, Comcast is using us to do set-top box, uh, uh, you know, uh, data mining and determining what their customers want, using Elasticsearch and so on. So Portworx has been just a dream startup for us. I think just something that we are very, very proud of and very happy with. The team's been amazing too.
That's pretty cool for the third one and coming out of retirement.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so the normal, VC and building a team and engaging with customers and selling and growing and so forth is happening here. And the customer engagement, the market, product market fit seems to be ideal. And the traction and the momentum is amazing. So now it kind of feels like you're probably going to be back into the notion of working with the employees, building the culture and setting the tone for that as you have always done before.
Clearly, you've experienced Mark Templeton. Mark Templeton is one who believes in sort of the importance of culture. I believe that culture really should be a competitive advantage. It's just as important as your technology. In some ways, I mean, it's more important, right? Look, every place, Brad, you worked in so many different companies. Every place has a culture, right? Every place has a culture. They may not express it, they may not put it up on posters on the wall, whatever, but every place has a culture, and it's either good, neutral, or bad, right? And people know, employees feel it. They know what they feel. They will tell you if you were to ask them. Now, my belief is it should not be negative. It should not be neutral. In fact, it should be a positive. It should be one of the prime drivers and motivators for people. So, there's this kind of I have this view that I've often used, right? Which, like, you'll see people's behavior when you work at a place. You'll see how people behave. The execs behave, sometimes how the employees behave, how they treat each other, how they respond. But really, behavior is like the tip of the iceberg, right? There's people's beliefs, there's their values. That's the big 80% of the iceberg is underneath the water. You may not see their values, you may not see their beliefs, but that's what's causing the behavior, right? So sometimes if you try to push an iceberg, like push that thing on the top, the bottom part will bring it right back. So you can't really change people's behavior. What you need to really do is get at the values that you want them to have. And again, you really sometimes can't even change values. You need to kind of hire and build those values. So one of the things I think we did very effectively at Portworx was really kind of tap into the value system that we wanted people to have. And we hired for it. We would look for it explicitly. We would test for it in interviews. Second, we would reward people who showed those values, right? We would have, awards that we would give, and so what was, we had a bunch of values, right? Like, I mean, one of the things was customer first. We said the customer is the most important person. Our success lies in the customer success. And there's a saying that I always have for support, like in a startup, when you buy the product, you get the company, right? And that's especially true when a whole company is customer first. When at Portworx, whenever there's an issue with a customer, everybody jumps on it. You drop what you have. People would leave my staff meeting. They wouldn't attend my staff meeting. And I would be like, I'm not gonna yell at them, scream at them. Or it's bad. It's good. In fact, if there's a customer problem, why are you in my meeting, right? So customer first is an example, right? Taking initiative. We talked about, like, everybody is a salesperson. Everybody is a leader. Every employee in a startup, but actually even in bigger companies, they're a leader. They own a bunch of things that's theirs, and you have to kind of lead that. You're not there to work for a paycheck. You're there to accomplish your leadership job, right? So those are the kinds of values that we have, and also looking out for each other, right? I remember this one occasion, our teams were very hard on each other. Like, if you didn't do your stuff, they would be like, you didn't manage your doing performance management. Employees would kind of hold each other to high expectations. But I remember one of our employees had, really a terrible illness with one of our daughters, and the whole team coalesced around her. They said, go, take care of your daughter, do what you need to do. We've got you. We got your back, right? So this kind of kindness and being being there for each other. These are all the kinds of values, and you've got to figure out, every company has to kind of figure out what values are important to succeed in that particular business. It's not the same values in every company. So I think those kinds of things have really paid off well for us. It's really, really important. I think, Portworx, even after, Pure Storage has been a wonderful acquirer for us. The business is kind of quadrupled. The team has tripled. So there's a big team now, right, all across the world, and these folks largely kind of subscribe to the value. They're there because they believe in the values. It aligns with their value system, and I think that's kind of been something that has been very, very important to me, right? And like you said, I think when a team gets to a certain size, the role of the CEO also changes, right? Of course, you always have strategy, but culture doesn't start from the bottom up. It doesn't. It starts from the top down. It starts from the founders and eventually the management team and the leadership, and you can't kind of give that over, right? So we have to kind of showcase that culture in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I agree. I think that culture is always set top down. That's been my experience, and especially when the leader at the top is actually a strong leader, and they have all these skills that you're suggesting, the empathy and the connection, compassion, and really, not only for the team, the product, the customers, the partners, the ecosystem, the whole thing. It's amazing. So it was great to see you grow Portworx as not a feature but a product, and then bring it into Pure Storage and have it as an additional product line over there, and stay with them to merge that in and make it seamless and continue to grow it while it's there. There's nothing better than after an acquisition, you see that product line grow that company with the intent of the acquisition and see those results.
The team is amazing, right? They're succeeding, and I think we're in great hands. Charlie Giancarlo, the CEO, is a wonderful CEO for our business. Somebody who's kind of a long vision for our business, sees that it's really a part of his future and the company's future. So I think we're sort of in good hands. Time for me to do something completely different, right? So I'm off on what I hope will be an adventure for me. It's just been a couple of months, and like I said, I think I learned enough from my last retirement that I feel, not that I have anything planned. I actually don't. I don't really have anything planned, but I feel a little bit more confident that I'll figure it out. Right? It's kind of like my toolkit for being a CEO. I feel like I have got some retirement toolkits, and it's gonna be an adventure.
Oh yeah, no, I can imagine. And I know you're going to look for a sense of purpose, and you are going to look for intellectual stimulation, and I'm sure you're going to find it at every turn. And speaking of this next section that I've got for you here, and by the way, thank you for sharing that beautiful, illustrious career. I've got the speed round for you.
You're going to throw some things at me, and I have no idea what you're going to ask about. Okay, all right?
That's right. These are total surprises, all right? You ready for speed round number one?
Sure.
Here we go. Number one, what's one leadership mistake you'd never repeat?
I would be very candid about people's shortcomings with them and things they need to fix sooner. One of the things you learn is when you let somebody go, or you tell somebody that they need to kind of make some improvements, at least in my case, I always did it much later than I should have. And it's really a terrible, the worst thing. And I've been guilty of this many times, when people go, why are you not letting this person go? And I kind of, hung on too long with their mistakes, or hung on too long with them when they were really not a good fit for the job, or the job had outgrown them. And, now I think it's just best to kind of let them know earlier the better.
So what's your advice to managers that are in that same position right now? Do you think about, and especially a CEO, do you think about the individual and the impact on them, or do you think about the company, or do you think about the rest of the employees that are impacted, the customers that are impacted? How does your head wrap around that and you make the right decision in the right time?
In the end, of course, it's fitness for the job, right? Are they able to kind of accomplish what it is? But I'll tell you one thing, right? Again, this is just a value I have, right? You you never ignore the individual. You do it as much as you can collaboratively with the individual. So you share feedback with them. Nothing should be a big surprise, right? You're sharing feedback with them all along, and you're getting concurrence. Do they agree? Do they not? Why do they disagree? What evidence is there that we can? What experiments can we try to find out if they tried something different, would it work? So there's been, and it's really funny. Both these are at Net6, Brad. Where there's only two people that I feel like when I've let them go, that they felt that they were treated unfairly. Post that, right? And I still remember both these people. You know them, and they felt they were let go unfairly. I really believe after that, I've let a lot of folks go. I mean, it's just a startup world. I mean, it's just the economy. Sometimes it's the business. Uh, but I don't believe any of them felt that they were treated unfairly. I think they also had some point where they kind of went, yeah, it's it's not working out, right? So I think you do both, right? You of course, people have families. It's but really you're not doing them any favor that they're a misfit in that position. They're being, you know, not working out. No, the team doesn't like them. It's evident to everybody else on the staff that they're not working out. So I think you can do it collaboratively.
Yeah, and I think if you do, then there is no misunderstanding and they don't feel like they've been let go unfairly. Unlike the person at Net6, that inside sales rep that was working a completely another job at the same time.
You remember that? He was working two jobs, for God's sake.
That's pretty illustrious, but no, we need focus here. Yeah. So, hey, that brings us to the next question, which is, what was the best career advice you've ever received?
Was to trust in people, right? And frankly, I didn't receive it as sort of the spoken word. I saw people, again, like in my HP days. Like I said, I think I learned a lot of my kind of personal value lessons from my HP days. It's a great upbringing. I saw Marty trust in people that other people didn't know. Well, you putting this person in charge of this stuff, and he would trust in them, and he would back them up, and he would give them a little bit of rope, right? Like, you can hang yourself, but you can also kind of go far, and we're gonna let you do that. And I think trusting in people and giving them the backing they need if they have a tough job. It's sort of the opposite of what we talked about just now. Sometimes you have to let people go, but you give them as much of a chance to succeed, and you trust people because you kind of make a bet on them. So that a lot of people bet on me in HP, and I think and I've bet on a lot of people, and I think it's been the best advice that I can give people.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of people that you mentioned that were sort of star hard workers, committed, and you might not know that they're on the right path or not, but they'll find that path eventually, so you trust that. It's like, folks that are rock climbers and they're kind of tied together. They have to trust each other with their life effectively. It feels like in the business world, you have to establish a relationship with these employees to the extent that you can almost trust them with your life, with your business life, I guess.
Absolutely. Yes, it comes by getting close to people and understanding them, their motivations, their values, their goals, right? I mean, one of the things that I've kind of always learned is when you do a one-on-one with people, right? There's a lot of one-on-ones people do with people. A lot of the times, the manager will measure the quality of the one-on-one by how does that person feel about me? Oh, do they feel great that I kind of gave them the answer? I gave them a secret. I told them the clue, right? That's a terrible measure of a one-on-one. Another measure that they have is they kind of go, hey, how does the person, do they feel like they got instruction to go do something very specific, right? I gave them the direction. My measure of a really great one-on-one is, how does that person feel about themselves at the end of this? Are they turned on by what they want to go do next, right? And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? If you can figure out what people want to go do next and they are driven, motivated, and you can then bet on them, right? That's the trick. So you don't bet unknowingly, you have to bet knowingly.
Oh, yeah. And through the relationship is how you can actually determine that, I would suspect. Number 3, what's something you once believed that you no longer do?
Oh, wow, these are good questions. Look, I'm going to talk about something entirely different. Look, I used to believe that open source was the panacea as a way to kind of do great startup businesses. And it's a little bit of a longer conversation, but let me just condense it. I don't believe that anymore. I think open source is a great way to kind of have innovation, right? And all that. But I'll tell you, open source is a terrible way, especially in the early beginning. If you start an open source project, you're going to spend the next 6-7 years trying to build a product with a whole bunch of engineers who don't work for you. Second, you're going to build it, right? And build a community at the same time. So you're going to spend tons of money doing meetups and blah, 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 and all this stuff trying to get it adopted, right? So think about this as a startup. As a startup, you've spent first 4 or 5 years of your life building a product with a whole bunch of people who don't report to you. It's hard enough to build a great product when everybody reports to you. Second, you're spending tons of money buying tacos and beer for people all over that freaking world, and you've spent all that money. Third thing is, frankly, you're building it for developers who are the usual adopters of open source. Who's got the money? You can get the mind share with developers, but the wallet share comes from IT. IT wants a different product than the developers. So at the end of this 4 or 5 years, you've built sort of a product that's wrong for the people who have money, right? So I believe open source, people think, oh, I'm going to start an open source project and it's going to turn into this major startup. Well, guess what? 6-7 years later, you'll discover you've spent a boatload of time and money and you have a bunch of adopters who don't have any money, right? I think the only open source products that work are when something has already been successful. Somebody has done all that missionary work. And then now you take it on and you go build an IT version of that product for people. So I guess the myth in the world, in the Valley certainly, is that the way you do startups is you start an open source project. And I don't think that's the way to do it. You can adopt something that has already been successful and got huge adoption. And if you can build a company on top of that, that's fine. But there's more open source corpses around us in the world around here than open source successes.
So maybe Red Hat is a good example of someone who's done it successfully.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, they built on Linux. Who put in all the sweat equity? Linus Torvald and his cohorts.
And a lot of other people before them, and they leveraged all that. Perfect example of the way you described it.
AT&T, Berkeley, all those folks, those colleges that did all that work.
All right. Good advice. No open source and no nonprofit. Okay.
Exactly.
Not in the IT world, at least. So here's the next one. In the world of startup, what's your go-to book recommendation?
I'd say read science fiction. A good science fiction book is about a world that doesn't exist yet. It is about a world that is created by the people in the book, created by the author, created by the folks. A startup world is a world that doesn't exist yet. You're trying to create it's the art of the possible, right? And crafting that from it's crafting strategy from fog, right? Look, I think I had a boss at HP who was a Book of the Month Club guy, and every quarter he would read a book, and we would be doing that for a quarter until he got his next Book of the Month Club thing, and then we would switch again, right? So some of these things, of course, they're great advice and so on, and maybe I'll eat my words and do a book one day. But I think, to me, creativity comes from multiple sources. So, just like people tell you, right? People who do great at computer science are also great at music, right? So I believe it's kind of like a cross training exercise, right? Like sometimes if you are playing a sport, they'll tell you go do swimming and exercise other muscles of your brain. So to me, I believe in things that make you creative, whether it's music or whether it's science fiction and so on. And there's amazing books in that genre that people can go read. I don't know if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, but it's something totally different.
No, that is totally different and original. And I am impressed and blown away that you've characterized startup companies as science fiction, which is brilliant. I mean, like, who would have ever thought? But that's exactly what they are.
Turning it into nonfiction, right? You start with science fiction, you turn it into nonfiction. So
Exactly. Oh my God, that is a bumper sticker, man. We got it. That is just like everybody should be understanding and repeating that. Well, listen, number 5. What's a small daily habit that's made a big impact?
oh, look, this is something brand new. It's something I actually didn't believe in. I've last several years I've started to do meditation. It's a type of stuff called transcendental meditation, and frankly, I'm not one of these, candles and beads and incense kind of guy. That's not. I mean, I'm probably a little bit more practical than that. But in the last several years, took I took a class on transcendental meditation. In fact, at the intro of the class, the people got up and said what they thought. Why are they in the class? I got up and I said, I'm here just to try it out, and I actually don't believe that it works, right? And I'll tell you what the guy replied, right? Amazing reply. He said, well, the good news is it doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not, because it's either going to work for you or not, independent of your belief. And so I've tried this, and it's been amazing, Brad. Like, it's 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. There's like 100 types of meditation, right? I specifically have been doing this thing called TM, Transcendental Meditation. You can take classes in it and stuff. And look, it's energized me. It's made me more creative. It's made me process stuff better. I'm able to kind of, there's always the usual stuff. You step outside yourself and look at a problem from all the angles and this and that and all of that. So it's kind of a weird little thing that I never thought I would use or like, but I do it, and it's wonderful.
I don't think it's a weird thing at all. I think it's fantastic. So it's probably different for anyone that would attempt to do it. They might have a different experience. Can you share what happens to you in your experience for those 20 minutes?
Yeah. So it doesn't happen all the time, and when it happens, believe it or not, this is going to sound crazy. It happens only in like 2 minutes of those 20 minutes, right? So there's sort of this. There's a three. If the whole experience is 3 parts, and sometimes you never get to part 3. The part 1 is you're thinking your mind is being hit with all of your usual thoughts. What do I do next? What is this problem I have to do solve at work? Oh, my daughter couldn't finish her homework. I wonder if she's gonna, so it's basically intrusive thoughts, like, that are coming. And what you have to do is, for me at least, what works is just sort of let it just go through. Don't try to process it. Sometimes you follow it, sometimes you don't, but you don't. You just sit there and let it happen, right? Then what happens is a bunch of that second phase is a bunch of those things disappear, and it comes to a subset. This is where you spend the bulk of your time. It's actually, I always think of this as like the water. In the beginning, you're at the top of the water, and the waves are like hitting your head, and you're like going nuts, right? Then you kind of go a little bit deeper, and you left with a few things, and it's almost like bubbles. These problems, you actually follow them. You kind of go, okay, I'm going to think about this, and then it just sort of, you don't necessarily resolve them, but you think about them and you just let it sit, and eventually it'll kind of go away. And usually that's like 70, 75% of the time that I've done this. The third thing is once in a while, and it's only for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you now go to the bottom of the sea. If you think of the sea, the top is like all these waves. The bottom of the sea, it's completely still. You're just like, you know, there's nothing, there's no motion, and your mind has kind of stopped by its own, thinking about any of these things. And these 2 minutes feel like 30 minutes in it's 2 minutes in real time, but in meditation time, I guess it's like 30 minutes. And then I'll tell you, you come out of it, right? And you feel like you've been out for an hour. And then the rest, what I found is I'm able to kind of find answers to all kinds of problems that I've had for a while. Bam, I have a lot more energy. I'm a lot more, uh, my processing power is kind of like my CPU has turned into a GPU or some shit like that, right? Like, it's like it turned on. So it happens rarely, but it works. It's magical.
Well, if there are those that are interested, is there a place online or somewhere you would recommend they go?
I think, there's actually TM is very specific. They want you to kind of go to their classes. So, for example, if for folks in the Bay Area, you could just look up, there's usually a TM center. There's one in Mountain View. You can just go sign up. And it's not like a 8-month course or something. They just, you just do 3 or 4 classes and then you're thrown back into the ocean and you just go figure it out on your own.
Cool. I like that imagery of going to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean and it's so still. And maybe at that point, there's no thought and you really reconnect with who you really are.
Exactly.
Hey, so number 6, one thing you miss about startup life and one thing you don't.
Well, I don't miss the frantic schedule. Like I think, it's good to have a life dictated by you, even though you're in a startup. Sometimes your life is not your own, right? Like there, crisis happens. So I of all the things I miss the least, I miss the schedule, having a crazy schedule the least. I've done it for many, many years. So I think what I miss is the challenge, right? Um, one of my mentors always told me that goals are really good for you. I used to hate goals, right? Like, God, I hate having to hit a number for the quarter, or hate having to have you exercised enough, or have you done it, oh, whatever, all these goals. But then, what I realize is, and I have realized now for a while, is that goals motivate you. Having a goal is motivational. It's a pain. It's a pain because sometimes you kind of feel like, I don't know, what the hell, can I do this? I don't know, do I have enough time? Do we have enough resources? Are we going to hit this goal? Is it unrealistic? Whatever it is. But a challenge is motivational. And so I do miss the challenge. And so in I guess now I have to make my own challenges or find new challenges and so on. I haven't really done that part yet, but I do miss that part.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you're in the startups, you're working with the team and you're working with the customers. It's always great to connect with the customer that comes back and tells you how much their life has improved with this product or service offering you've given them. I mean, that's what it's all about. And then working with the team and seeing them collaborate together and inspire each other, those things, that's what you can get out of a really well-driven, successful startup. And it's interesting to see when you're now retired, you'll find other ways to find those connections, I'm sure. Well, and this brings us to the last question, which is if you could time travel back to your first day at HP, remember that? What would you whisper to yourself?
I've never believed in living a life with looking back with regrets, right? That's just a waste of energy, a waste of time. And so it's not a bunch of regrets, but what I would have said is I would have done the entrepreneur thing earlier, right? I would say, hey, you know what? You're challenged. You're enjoying and learning a lot when I was in HP, but I could have sort of not waited 15 years before I left to go start startup. So I would have said, hey, don't let your enjoyment and excitement and your loyalty to the people around you prevent you from seeking out your adventures sooner, right? it was their adventure, not my adventure. Of course, I made it my adventure, and we built new adventures. But I would have done that sooner, I guess.
And, if you could time travel, it isn't really necessarily about regrets. You might go back to your 22 and a half year old self and just go, don't worry about a thing. You're going to have a ball.
Yeah, you can give yourself reassurance and so on too, right? Yeah, yeah. Give yourself the advice. Yeah, I think I soaked it up pretty well. I was getting good advice and so on from a lot of people, and over the years, I've kind of learned more from other people than I've kind of come up with on my own. So I think I grew up in a wonderful place.
Well, it's interesting when I asked you about your favorite book. I get that there's so many different sources of information today. It might not just be a book like it was years ago, but also you're such a seasoned veteran that you have all these things all packed away and you're all kind of full on all this stuff that you don't necessarily even think about going out. Now, there is the next generation that's trying to figure a few things out, and they would love to hear a book from you if you create a book or an Audible for sure. Now, the last question I'll ask you here, and it's kind of off the books here, is what do you think the impact on this universe is going to be from AI?
AI is gonna do two things, right? The initial thing it's gonna do is turn humans into superhumans of sort, right? So a lot of things that it's kind of like the internet did for us, or even Google search did for us, right? I mean, or technology has done for us, right? We uh, we could never leap tall buildings in a single bound, but now we can fly from one continent to the other because of technology. So it's no different from other technologies. But what it's going to do is relieve the humans can now kind of go, oh, you know what, I can just ask for a bunch of stuff, like I don't need to retain information in my head anymore. I have search, right? So what I can do is I can take things that I think I'm good at and be amazing at them, right? That's kind of one thing, right? By just turning me into a superhuman because I got all these help kind of people boosting me up kind of thing. But the other thing that it does, I think it will do once it gets developed in a different way where it becomes more agentic, it's embedded in all the lives around it, just like electronics is and so on. I think, Brad, is that what it's going to do for us is it's going to relieve us of a lot of mundane stuff that we have to do in life today, right? It's like Archimedes discovering the lever, right? Like a lever allowed people to kind of lift weights now. That with the help of a rod and a fulcrum, you can now lift weights that you couldn't lift before, and stuff like that, right? So it's the same thing. There's a lot of things that we do today that is a little mundane. For example, we all of the settings for this. I mean, if you're going to have to do a lot of editing and you're going to do a bunch of editing here, you're going to adjust the lighting. You're going to go, hey, Murli's got like, some shiny forehead, this, that, whatever you're going to have to do, right? It'll do all of that for you, right? So it's stuff that you may not enjoy doing. So one is it's going to, and it's going to come later, I believe, remove all the mundane stuff out of our lives so we can kind of go move up the self-actualization pyramid, the Maslow hierarchy. And second, it's going to turn humans into superhumans in the stuff that they're already good at. It's going to make you amazing.
Well, and in your career, you hired software developers all the time. All right. So imagine another startup where you've got AI that's really kind of not only doing QA on the software, but it has software available to it. I want it to do this, and it pulls those pieces of software together. So do you hire less software engineers, but each one is like a super software engineer now?
And the funny thing is, Brad, I don't know why there's all this hoo-ha and this mystery about it. It's what technology has been doing for us over and over and over and over again, right? I mean, you don't run 10 miles to go get your groceries. You just get in a car and go there. I mean, it's gonna be like that. I mean, I don't understand all this. Oh my God, this fear and this is, yeah, there's a little bit of fear. I think, but I think, we've mastered a lot of technologies. People were afraid to drive cars because they were gonna go burst into flame on the roads, right? And for a long time, people would never drive cars. And look, now we're kind of doing it Okay, if you looked at an airplane before it was invented, you'd kind of go, "What the hell is this? How is this tons of steel in the air?" Right? I mean, so I think there's a lot of fears that are unfounded. I think it's going to be we're going to be superhuman soon, and a lot of stuff that we don't want to do or can't do is going to be done for us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it makes each and every person in whatever role they have, most roles, is superhuman for sure. Now, it's interesting. Along the way of the three startups we talked about, there was a gentleman named Gautam Rao, or
Yeah.
Goo. He's actually on to his fourth one now, Newbird.
Yes. Look, I told you, smart, driven, fearless, right? And yeah, those are amazing guys. I think they have this thing off to a great running start. They got tons and tons of people trusting them and funding them, right? And they're on I think another great adventure, right? It's exciting.
Oh yeah, I see his social media posts all the time now. It's very cool to see him doing that in the right in the AI space.
Yep.
So we'll see all the skills he's acquired over the last three startups applied in here.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pro, right? Yeah, these guys are veterans.
Oh yeah, no, it's great to see.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's wrap things up. How would you like to share your final message with the audience that's still with us at this point? Words of wisdom.
I have two things. It's stuff that we haven't really spent much time in the podcast around, and the two things are: one, I would tell people, you are the architect of your life. You're a lot more in control of your life than you realize. Don't be a victim of circumstance, like the Billy Joel song says, or I mean, architect your life. You own your life. You need to architect your life. That's one. Okay. The second part is really, it's going to sound a little bit funky, Brad. So forgive me. But I think living a life of joy is really something that I've kind of discovered, right? Joy comes in all sorts of forms, but you discover the joy within you, and that leads you to find the joy in others and people and things around you, right? So living a joyous life in the end is so wonderful. Why would you do anything else, right? Why would you not live a joyous life? And if you think the joy is not in your control, you're wrong. You are the architect of your life. So you can architect your life to be a joyous life. And then once you're joyous, you'll find joy in every person and thing around you. We're surrounded by joy, right? We're surrounded by grief and hate and problems also, but you can kind of choose and craft a life of joy. So sounds very hokey, but I just thought I'd throw that out.
No, not hokey at all. And I love the fact that it fits right in with the notion of meditation, as you talked about before. You sort of take away the distractions of the world, find yourself inside and find that joy in yourself and then bring that out. And you've done that over your entire career, not only your karaoke parties that you have, but at your different startup companies and the places you've worked, that signature laugh, hearing it down the hallway. Everybody knows the sincerity that you bring to your leadership and your compassion and your joy for sure. So thank you for that, Murli.
Brad, thank you for taking the time. You've got all the hard work now to kind of make some out of all of these collection of talks. So thanks for taking the time and for thinking of me. I really appreciate that. You've brought a lot of joy in my life, so thank you for that too.
Great, and all the work that I have, I don't call it work, because it brings me joy. And if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. Yeah. So Murli, you know what? Thank you for sharing not just your milestones, but your mindset. From building world-class companies to redefining what success looks like in retirement, you've shown us how to lead with clarity, humility, and the joy we were talking about. And to the listeners, if this episode sparked something in you, take a moment today to reflect on what you're working toward and who you're becoming along the way. The rules of the game change, but what matters most is that purpose, integrity, and people never do. Thank you so much, Murli. I appreciate your time and your sharing today.
Thanks, Brad. We'll see you around.
If this conversation sparks something within you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others on your journey. And until next time, rethink the game and rewrite the rules. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.